because I at least still think that most of this grief is actually like rage and is actually pretty selfish. Like, I don't think we should like be praising Achilles for... Hello, and welcome to Winnow, a couple's close reading of the Iliad and the Odyssey. I'm Owen Gemmer.
I'm Isabella Gemmer. We are married, and we love to talk about books together.
In this podcast, we are working our way through the entirety of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey book by book, and this particular episode will cover the Iliad, book 18, which, fun fact, the original Greek editions would use the Greek letters of the alphabet to label the books rather than numbers, because there are 24 letters in the alphabet. And so this is book Sigma. If you know, you know.
Yeah, this one is an important book.
Yes. We both wore black in mourning for Patroclus.
Yeah. Well, I wear black almost all the time.
Yeah.
But you've worn Yeah. Yeah, this book has kind of two main parts. That's kind of how we're going to split things up. We've got Achilles' emotions is kind of the opening of the book, and we're going to talk a lot about that. And then it transitions to something else, a long poetic description of a piece of armor, which it's a total like vibe shift.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a really interesting choice, like to put these two things in like one chapter. But yeah, we're gonna dive into it.
Yeah.
So let's jump into our summaries.
Yes, we both did something slightly different this week.
Ooh.
I did something different after you said you did something different, and So you should go first because you wrote yours first.
Okay. I wrote rhyming couplets. Achilles learns that Patroclus is dead. He is angry and tears the hair from his head. Thetis comforts Achilles, tells him not to fight until she returns with a shield. To frighten the Trojans away from Patroclus' body, Achilles yells across the battlefield. Polydamas wants the Trojans to return to their city. Hector disagrees and thinks he's acting like a kitty. Patroclus burns on a funeral pyre, and Achilles' anger never wavers. Thetis goes to Hephaestus and asks him for a favor. It's a slant rhyme. Hephaestus makes Achilles the finest armor, a shield that depicts many things, even a farmer.
That's fun.
Yes, this was very fun.
Good. Well, because I've normally been writing short poems, and you kind of wrote a poem, I was like, I got to do something different. So this book is mainly about Achilles' survivor guilt. And I was thinking about other famous examples of survivor's guilt. And one came to mind that there is quite an emotional song about, that is Empty Chairs at Empty Tables by Marius from Les Mis. So I wrote a parody of Empty Chairs at Empty Tables, but about Achilles mourning Patroclus. I'm not going to sing it. I don't have a great singing voice, and Marius is a tenor, and I'm not. There's a grief that can't be spoken. There's a pain goes on and on. Empty tents on empty beaches. Now my friend is dead and gone. Here I talked of revolution. Here it was I sat with rage. Here he sang about tomorrow, and tomorrow never came. From the ships pulled on the beaches, we could see a Troy torn down, and they fought with spears clanging. I can hear him now. The very words that he had said became my wish's fulfillment on the lonely battlefield at Troy. Oh, my friend, forgive me, that I live and you are gone. There's a grief that can't be spoken. There's a pain goes on and on. Phantom faces at the porthole, phantom shadows on the floor, empty tents on empty beaches where my friend will meet no more. Oh, my friend, don't ask me what your sacrifice was for. Empty tents on empty beaches where my friend will sing no more. I feel like I didn't have to change much because it actually is pretty spot on.
Yeah. Well,
like there were some lines like, my friend, don't ask me what your sacrifice was for. Like, I think that's actually super relevant.
Yeah. Well, because it's like the original intent of the song is like the same thing. It's like someone mourning their comrades.
Right.
So it's like the exact same tone.
Yeah. But I just had to make everything singular because Achilles is only sad about Patroclus dead. All those other people who died, give or take.
Yeah.
But this one, my one friend, he's worthy of all of this.
Yes.
Yeah. So the main question that we want to ask in terms of articulating Achilles' emotions, I think you were probably intentional about using emotions because it's not just grief. There's definitely some anger and some rage sort of mixed in there. And we want to try and articulate like how much of this is sort of pure grief at the loss of his dear friend, and how much of it is also kind of him recognizing that he did this to himself, and maybe a little bit of like this selfish self-flagellation where he's like, oh gosh, like I brought this upon myself. Do you want to talk about like in like line 9, we get evidence, I think, that there's more to it than just pure grief about Patroclus?
Yeah. So very early on in the book, around Greek line 9, Achilles gives us some sort of background information.
This is before Antilochus has come back and told Achilles that Patroclus is dead.
Yeah.
So Achilles is just like waiting by himself.
And he already suspects what has happened. And he says, my mother told me something once. She said the best of all the Myrmidons would leave the sunlight, killed by Trojan hands, while I would stay alive. And surely now Patroclus, the brave son of Menoetes, must be dead. The stubborn fool. This is some background information that is basically telling us that Achilles suspected that his actions were going to lead to...
Not even suspected. His mom had like prophesied. Like it's not even a hunch. It's like, oh yeah, I do remember when my mom told me that if he goes out, he'll die.
Yeah. So again, this leaves like a lot of like why did Achilles even let Patroclus go out at all to fight?
Right. Either he just forgot about this prophecy and is only remembering it now. Whoopsie.
Yeah.
Or he really thought that he could overcome fate, because again, at the end of the speech right after you left off, he's like, I told him only chase them away from the ships. Don't chase them all the way to the walls. He must have disobeyed me. Yeah. And so like, right, like you could imagine in the sense where Achilles is like, yeah, I know this is probably going to happen. So let me just give Patroclus permission to go fight for like 15 minutes and then come back. And then we'll avoid fate that way. And so to me, I read it, as like this kind of hubristic, like I can circumvent this prophecy by, changing the scenario. And then he's realizing like, oh no, maybe fate caught up with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Achilles is having this realization that it's like all his actions that put this chain of events into motion. It's him asking Thetis to ask Zeus to bring destruction upon the Greeks so that he could have the comeback he's going to have and save everyone. Like that is the thing that is leading to all of this.
Yeah.
He is struck by intense grief. But it's also, like we're saying, anger. It's also like self-hatred.
Yeah.
I'd want to say. Yeah.
But yeah. So let's talk about the grief part, because it is there. Like we don't want to diminish the fact that like he clearly cared for Patroclus incredibly deeply, more so than literally anybody else in the whole book. And so his death does impact him on kind of just like a pure grief human level. But I think it's also important to continue investigating the nature of their friendship and why Patroclus was sort of, honored above everybody else. And, we'll be honest, like we know that the culture nowadays in 2025 is dominated by people being really big fans of Madeline Miller's Song of Achilles. We both read it. We have good things. Like I think it's written very well, and it's an interesting, I consider like fan fiction about the Iliad. But at least from my perspective, reading this here, I don't see any evidence of romance between Patroclus and Achilles. And I think a lot of people nowadays, because of the popularity of that book, just kind of assume that that's sort of there in the text.
Yeah, I think Song of Achilles has become so dominant in people's thought as they think about the Iliad. I think amongst people our age, amongst the Gen Z population, Song of Achilles is more popular and better well known than the Iliad. Yeah. We acknowledge that. And when we read this chapter in specific, like we really wanted to, get into the etymology of the words used in the Greek, and we really wanted to kind of investigate, this
the actual
seriously.
Evidence from the text.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to really go off of like what is in the text, not necessarily, what is in the zeitgeist, you could say.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So one of the first things that Achilles says about Patroclus to his mom like sees him being sad. And then his mom sort of like comes to him to comfort him. And so he has a conversation with his mom back and forth a little bit. So he opens his speech to his mom. My mother, all these things the Olympian brought to accomplishment, but what pleasure is this to me, since my dear companion has perished, Patroclus, whom I loved beyond all other companions, as well as my own life. This is Lattimore's translation that I'm reading from, because I think it's the most just kind of literal in terms of ability to like look stuff up in the Greek. So let's break this down. There's a couple components of this that we looked into. So the first part, what pleasure is this to me since my dear companion? So dear companion, how did Wilson do it?
My friend Patroclus.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's two words here in the Greek. The companion word we've talked about before is heteros. So it is more like comrade. There's a very clear like military connotation to it. Characters throughout the Iliad refer to each other as their comrades and companion and like brother in arms kind of thing. So it's very clearly there, like a very strong relationship that matters. But it's the same relationship that Achilles has, or that Odysseus has with Diomedes and Ajax with, everybody else. So there's that. But there is an adjective, dear companion or dearest companion. And that adjective is philos. So that is related to a word that is often translated as love. So some people translate this like beloved companion. And this adjective, right, is related to like philosophy and, lots of English words that have that phil root that is love. Mm-hmm. So there is something more about the companionship, the camaraderie between Achilles and Patroclus than with other people. Yeah. And that, again, is evident just from the fact that, like, Achilles doesn't mourn this extremely when other people die. Mm-hmm. He's like, there's something particular about Patroclus that raises it above.
Yeah. Perhaps you should give a little bit more background into why it's really interesting to look up the word love in the Greek. Some people might not know that there are very many words that can be used as love.
So throughout kind of the history of the Greek language, there are a lot of different words that get translated the same as love. I'm not super familiar with, in Homer's time, how many of them were popular or how many of them sort of arose afterwards. Yeah. But it is very clear, right? Like Eros was a god. Eros is the sort of god of like romantic love. Mm-hmm. That's where we get erotic and all of these other things from. And so there's a verb form of that. Again, I don't know how often Homer uses it. And then later, especially in the New Testament, there's another word, agape, and a verb form of that is more the kind of like charitable love that you extend to a stranger who needs your help and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then there's philos, which at least seems to be in Homer used more just kind of generally. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we might think of it more as like, friendship, the love you have for like your best friend or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it seems to be the one most commonly used in Homer. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So as further evidence of this, right, like I think a lot of people might take that, well, like my beloved companion might sort of imply something more about the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus. But in the same conversation with his mom, like literally on the facing page, Achilles has another long speech. The speech is, like 25, 30 lines long. And within that one speech, Achilles uses words with that same fill root 3 more times in 3 completely different contexts. Mm-hmm. So he uses it to describe, I'm not going back to the beloved land of my fathers. So it's that same adjective, but he's talking about like his homeland, realizing like I'm never going to get back to where I'm from. Then he's sort of like ranting a little bit. He talks about Hercules, where like Zeus was willing to like save Hercules from danger because he was dearest of all to Zeus. So the relationship between Zeus and Hercules is described with the same adjective. Mm-hmm. And then at the very end of the speech, he basically tells his mom, like, don't try and stop me from going back to the fight. Even though you love me, you will not persuade me. And so when he says, even though you love me, he's using the verb form of that philos, phileo, and so describing the love that his mom has for him. So within that paragraph, basically, you get the relationship that somebody has to their homeland, the relationship that Zeus had to Hercules, and the relationship that a mother has to a son, all using the same word that Patroclus is described as relating to Achilles. So again, this isn't to say that all of these are not special and they're not powerful, right? Like all of these things are powerful emotions in our life, the feelings we have for our homeland, for our mother, that Zeus has for Hercules, and that clearly Achilles has for Patroclus. But it's not like different. It's not set apart from that in what I interpret as anything like romantic.
Okay, so then the following lines, love is used again. I loved him more than any other comrade. I loved him like my head, my life, myself. So we found that this love in these following lines is a different word.
Yes, one that I had never really even seen translated as love before, and I find it really interesting that most translators do translate it even as love, because the verb form itself is tio, T-I-O, which is related to the noun time, which is honor. So it's like to honor or to esteem or to value somebody. So it's also though used for like, I value this oxen at, this price or something like that. So it can be used on a just literal, like the value of your property, or it can be used like I honor this person, I esteem this person. So again, like it's still a good thing. Like he does use, again, very superlative language of like, I honor, I esteem Patroclus beyond everybody else. And so there's something special there, but again, it's this relationship of a comrade, somebody that I have grown up with, that I have fought alongside, that I have great respect for, that I have great admiration for, similar to the way he has admiration for Odysseus and others. It's just even stronger with Patroclus.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we didn't really find evidence of erotic love.
And for me, I think as well, like, even if there was like, physical intimacy happening between them, like it doesn't change that much for me, because I at least still think that most of this grief is actually like rage and is actually pretty selfish. Like, I don't think we should like be praising Achilles for his emotions in book 18 and his reaction to this. I don't think it's like an admirable way to express your emotions at the death of somebody that you care deeply about.
Yeah, it's hard to tell, is it genuine and intense, this intense? Is it really over the top? Is it really like, and it does seem to be Achilles' sort of MO to react disproportionately to things around him.
Yes.
So like, even though, as we talked about even back in book 1, right? Like, even though we were kind of on his side with like, it's understandable why he might be sort of angry at Agamemnon. But it does seem to be this thing that kind of continues through the entirety of the Iliad. It grows into more and more of like okay, now you're kind of overreacting.
Yeah. I don't think kind of. I think he definitely is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where to me it feels, again, sort of performative, where he's realized that like, oh, I really messed up in all of this. My ego got the better of me, and I can now use this as fuel for the continued rage. But now I can I can call it revenge, right? Like, now I can sort of like have this reason for other people to not criticize it, because if I just was like, if I've been angry this whole time, they've been criticizing me because like, oh, Achilles is just petty. Like, he's just upset about this one thing that happened, days ago with Agamemnon. But now I feel like Achilles is sort of like, I don't think it's conscious. I think this is like some subconscious, like, aha, like finally now I have a justifiable reason to express my rage that I've been holding on to this whole time in a way that other people can understand. Now it can be revenge for Patroclus, because everybody knows we were close. And now I can like use that as the sort of like external validation for these internal feelings.
Yeah. He does have a really interesting line though. It's around Greek line like 105. He's talking about how upset he is with himself. I provided no light or help to him or anybody. Many were overpowered by glorious Hector, while I sat here beside the ships, so useless, a burden on the earth, although I am superior to all the bronze-clad Greeks in war, though others may be better speakers. If only conflict were eliminated from gods and human beings. I wish anger did not exist. Even the wisest people are roused to rage, which trickles into you sweeter than honey, and inside your body it swells like smoke. Just so Lord Agamemnon enraged me. He is recognizing his faults. Even though he is the strongest Greek warrior, he is still powerless against like his inability to control himself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. He's kind of using like this external language of like, rage has kind of infiltrated me. And if only this sort of external force didn't exist, I'd be fine. But I'm sort of like a victim of this sort of possession.
In the text, time and time again, like, you know, it is questionable how much control these guys in war have over themselves when sometimes, like, when they are, you know, a god can, you know, inflame them or tear them down, you know? And so, you know, there are these things that like that are seemingly beyond one's control and that are kind of in fate and stuff. The rage that he feels, the rage that's mentioned in, you know, the opening line of the whole book is ultimately like his tragic flaw. The thing that both makes him the best warrior, but also the warrior who will die. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, and I think there is a way to read. So like one of my favorite tragedies is Othello. And I think this moment is semi akin to Othello's moment of realization that like he's already killed Desdemona and now he's like, oh gosh, like Iago was lying to me this whole time. And Othello's reaction is to end his own life. And here Achilles doesn't do that as directly, but he does seem to like embrace the fact that, right, the choice that his mom has given him seems still valid. Like you could go home and live a long life, or if you stay and fight, you're going to die. And he now has already accepted, I'm going back into this fight and I know that I'm going to die. And so he has sort of chosen his own death as the ultimate response to this moment that I think, like echoes that sort of tragic arc that's very common, that like I have this fatal flaw. It makes me great at the beginning, but then I slowly realize that it has corrupted me. And the only response is to no longer live.
Well, I will point out there is a moment where Antilochus literally has to, you know, hold Achilles' hands back so that he could not use an iron knife to slit his throat. So his initial response is to off himself.
Yeah, it is the Othello response. Yeah.
Yeah, but then I think he sort of realizes, particularly when he talks to his mom reminds him of like the prophecy and like, oh, you kind of did this to yourself. And conveniently, if you just go into war, once you kill Hector, you will get killed. So that's almost convenient for Achilles at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, beyond this initial grief, then once the action kind of resumes, there's other evidence as well that I think feeds at least my interpretation, that the primary emotion Achilles is feeling in this book is not grief, but is rage. And the grief is there, but it's kind of just a side emotion. Antilochus had originally come back and just told Achilles that Patroclus is dead and they're still fighting over his body. Then later, after the grief and the conversation with his mom, Iris comes and is like, hey, like his body's still out there. Like you should go put your armor on and you know, help fight and get it back. Yeah. And Achilles doesn't, both because he doesn't have any armor at this point.
Yeah, well, Achilles promises his mom that he won't go out and fight until she returns.
With new armor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Achilles' compromise is to just like go stand on the battlefield and just like yell a bunch.
Yes, it is quite awesome, I will say. Just as a trumpet sounds a clear, loud note when murderous enemies besiege a city, so loud rang out the war cry of Achilles, the grandson of great Asius. His voice of bronze roused fear in every Trojan's heart. But there's also like, their charioteers were horrified to see uncanny fire blazing above the head of brave Achilles, lit by divine Athena, bright-eyed goddess. 3 times Achilles screamed across the trench. 3 times the Trojans and their allies panicked. I think the war cry thing is cool because it's like just the action of Achilles like yelling across the battlefield is enough to like make the Trojans scared.
Yeah.
It's also reminiscent of like the beast is awake, you know, like he's not there yet, but he has been awoken.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that kind of vibe.
Right. But again, from Achilles' perspective, like the yelling seems like an outlet for like, this combo of grief and rage. That, yeah, like it is a way of manifesting that will become manifest in more direct violence later. But like for right now, it's this like incredible, just like exhalation of all of the emotions that he's feeling.
Sometimes I worry that we don't kind of teach men that, you know, the variety of emotions that a human can feel, like they can all be different, and like that you can like learn to distinguish between your emotions to try to feel out what you really feel about a situation. Like, and not every time you feel an overwhelmingly strong emotion does it have to go into the category of rage automatically. You know, that's kind of what Achilles does. Like anytime he feels any emotion that he just can't contain, it like gets put in the rage category. When like, you know, you can kind of sit with your feelings and you can distinguish, you know, what are the nuances of my emotions instead of just automatically putting things into rage category, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, last night in the Bible study that I'm in, we're reading through Mark's gospel, and there's a moment in Mark chapter 3 where Jesus comes across a man with a deformed hand, and it's the Sabbath day, and he's like going to heal him, and the Pharisees are all around, and they're like, "Oh, don't heal on the Sabbath day." And Jesus,
gotcha.
Jesus looks at them, and the narrator, Mark, describes that Jesus looked on them with anger, and so it describes that he has anger at. But then it says, and there was also, I don't remember the exact wording, but it's described as he also had grief at the hardness of their hearts. And so we talked about how like righteous anger, you know, even from a Christian perspective, like can be good, right? Like we should be angry when we see sin, when we see injustice, that there is a proper use of anger. Yeah. But Jesus here demonstrates that like actually that pairs really well with grief, because we shouldn't be angry at the person. We should be angry at like the conditions of their life that have led them to this sinfulness. And so I've been thinking a lot. That's why I've been toying with this, like the balance of like anger and grief that actually should go well together. But when they're out of proportion, I think Achilles demonstrates, I think, too much anger that is not tempered enough by real grief. Because it feels to me, again, I'm obviously coming at this from a more sort of like Christian perspective that wasn't present here. But if you really feel grief about the death in battle of your comrade, the response of wanting to create more death for other people's comrades feels misplaced, right? That like, shouldn't it be to stop the war rather than to continue the war if you truly feel grief at the death of a comrade? Because again, there's another moment that I think, again, is demonstrative of Achilles taking it too far, where he promises to Patroclus's corpse, basically, that when we give you a funeral, I will capture 12 Trojans and slaughter them on your funeral pyre.
12 Trojan children.
Yeah. It's like, it's crazy. He's just like, yeah, like I'm gonna capture a bunch of Trojan kids.
12 lovely Trojan children, and slit their throats above your funeral pyre because I am so angry at your death. Yeah.
And so to me, like that is very clearly not grief. Like that is not the proper response. Like, yeah, he can be angry that his friend is dead. Like that is a proper, I think, emotion, but to express it in such violent terms is, I think, a misplaced understanding of how to deal with those emotions.
You've happened to stumble upon what, you know, is one of the main messages of the entire narrative, in the sense that you start with rage and conflict, and it only begets more rage and conflict and more and more and more.
Yeah.
And I think that you can view the Iliad as like escalating rage and conflict until it reaches, and we're not there yet, but until the rage and the conflict reaches a breaking point that kind of snaps reality in a sense. Like people have to find a way at some point to end it.
Yeah, and to rebalance. There's more action in the middle where the armies are fighting. They do get Patroclus's body back. They like prepare it for burial and all of this. But the main sort of second half of the book is focused on his mother, Achilles' mother Thetis, going and getting new armor for him. So she goes to Hephaestus, and somehow she has like another favor. Like Thetis has just the biggest bankroll of favors from the gods that she can pull, which is pretty impressive. And Hephaestus is like, yeah, whatever you want right now, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And he begins crafting the armor, which is dominated by like a 3-page long description of the shield. And then it's like 2 lines about the rest of the armor at the very end.
Yeah.
And so the Shield of Achilles becomes like the main thing of the back half of book 18. It's quite famous. You've probably maybe heard of it. But you did some research into the sort of poetic form of this description of the shield.
Yeah. So on the front of this shield, Hephaestus has made this sweeping, visual portrait. And it's quite interesting because I think for modern readers, it comes out of kind of nowhere. But I discovered that it is...
And it kind of drags on, I'll be honest.
Yeah, but I like it. I think it's really good. It is part of it's a rhetorical device or a poetic device. It's called ekphrasis, which basically means description. So it's a known thing. It's basically a written description of a visual work of art. And it also normally emphasizes the sort of motion or action of a work of art that is otherwise sort of still. It is like huge in scope. It starts by literally saying like, I'll just read it. So Hephaestus is making the shield. On it he made the earth, the sky, the sea, the sun that never wearies, the full moon, and all the wondrous stars that crown the sky. So he's making he's making the whole world, the whole cosmos, because he's also making all the constellations. And then he goes down, he like takes it down to earth in a sense. And he describes these cities of peoples, and then he pulls out farther and he talks about like the surrounding landscapes and like the farmers over here and the sheep herders over here and like what they're doing. And it kind of goes on like that for a while. You've got people dancing and you've got people quarreling, and it is epic in scope, this description of this work of art on the shield. Yeah, it focuses on like the really big and the really small.
And both the really happy and the really violent and the sort of full range of human life and human emotions.
Yeah, like you could like on the shield exists like all these contradictions. Also, it's not depicting one thing. It's not depicting one emotion, happiness, or it's not depicting brutality, war. Like it's this like mixture and mingling of these things. And one of the reasons that I think that it's there and it's a part of the narrative is that I think that it's supposed to ground the current events of the Iliad into the larger context of basically the whole cosmos. Similar to that one chapter that started by going forward in time by telling us how the wall that the Greeks built is going to get washed out into the sea. And putting that put things into perspective in terms of time, right? By zooming out in the timeline and showing us like, ultimately these actions are very small in comparison with like the whole of time. And then I think that the shield exists to do the same thing, but with space, to zoom out and make us feel how immense space is, but how small the ongoings of the Iliad are. Even though the war itself feels big, and it is big, it is still small in comparison with the cosmos.
Yeah, but I think the other part for me that I think it paradoxically is true that it is that and not that, because it is also a reminder that the cosmos is made up of small, mundane things. That
Yes.
like all of these images are very just kind of normal and expected things. And like that is what the universe is just like lots and lots of people doing lots and lots of normal things. And so it reminds me of the like how we spend our days is how we spend our lives, that like everybody is the cosmos because we are all that there is in that kind of sense. And so on the one hand, this is small, but on the other hand, it is small things that create the universe.
Even though like the earth, the sky, and the sea are represented and the constellations, it's not like Zeus in the main pantheon is represented, which is really interesting. It's very focused on human things and mortal things.
Yeah, and not even mythological, right? Like it could have easily been, and there was the depiction of Hercules slaying the Hydra and these kinds of things, but like none of the people are named. It's not like these grand figures of mythology who have been carved on. It's just like farmer and children and that kind of thing.
Yeah, everyone is basically unnamed.
Yeah.
There is mention of, capital M mayhem, capital A aggression, and capital D doom. Those are kind of the only maybe, sort of gods that you could say or mention. But yeah, it's very human and very mortal. It's like the things that people do, which are like they grow crops, they dance, they get married, they quarrel, and they fight just like in the Iliad. But kind of this reminder that like fighting isn't everything,
But again, in contrast, I think that's true. But also, this is on a shield that is literally about to go into war. And so I think it also becomes this commentary. We have to pay attention to what happens to the shield, because it is like, if this shield is the whole world, I think Homer is making us ask, like, what happens when the whole world is thrust into war? And so I'm spoiling. I know that there are moments where the shield like is described again, how it is used in the combat and what happens to it. And I think there's a lot of significance to that like, wait, whenever we see the shield, we have to now also import the whole world is participating in whatever this is.
Yeah. We should definitely keep track of that as we read forward.
Yeah. Are you familiar at all with W.H. Auden's poem, The Shield of Achilles? W.H. Auden is a famous poet who has a poem called The Shield of Achilles. I won't read the whole thing because it's fairly long, just like this. It's more pointed in its imagery. This is it's from the perspective of like somebody, Thetis, looking at the shield. Achilles' mom sort of like looking at the shield as it's being sort of handed to her. She looked over his shoulder for athletes at their games, men and women in a dance, moving their sweet limbs, quick to music. But there on the shining shield, his hands had set no dancing floor, but a weed-choked field. A ragged urchin, aimless and alone, loitered about that vacancy. A bird flew up to safety from his well-aimed stone. That girls are raped, that two boys knife a third, were axioms to him, who'd never heard of any world where promises were kept, or one could weep because another wept. The thin-lipped armorer Hephaestus hobbled away. Thetis of the shining breasts cried out in dismay at what the god had wrought to please her son, the strong, iron-hearted, man-slaying Achilles who would not live long. So it's much more bleak. It's much more like, in this version, Hephaestus only puts the negative. He shows the bleakest parts of humanity. And then this idea that like, this is what he made to please her son Achilles, I think adds this like sinisterness to Achilles, that like the world that Achilles lives in is bleak, that girls are raped, that two boys knife a third were axioms to him, who'd never heard of any world where promises were kept or one could weep because another wept. So this world is so,
it's compassionless,
and violence is just accepted and is axiomatic in the fabric of the universe. And that is the thing that Achilles needs in order to go into war.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I like it again as a kind of reinterpretation and in sort of fixing of not refixing, because it's not bad in the original, but like a changing of the imagery that does something, I think, very different in terms of its emotional impact. I do also just find it very funny that the description of the shield goes on for a very long time, and then we do get the description of like the rest of the armor, but it's literally like one line for like each piece of armor right at the very end, and then it's like over. Just the contrast, I think, for me was funny between how long he talks about the shield, and it's like, oh, the greaves, oh, yep, and then the breastplate, oh, yep, and then
yeah, the shield's like cute, yeah, and then it's like all the other pieces, are like really, really done, like they're done really quick. He like stamps them out. Psh.
All of this is obviously going back to Achilles, and so we know it's like not even a spoiler at all that like he's going back on the battlefield. He's going to have new armor. He's going to hunt down Hector, and he's going to take some prisoners in the process. And
yeah, but I don't think actually. I think maybe not in the next book.
Yeah, right. In the coming chapters.
Yes. Yeah. I think we still get one more. Yeah, one more. Dragging it out.
Oh, really? Oh, darn.
I think we might, yeah.
I didn't look far enough ahead, I guess.
Yeah, but we're getting there. But yeah, back to kind of what we've talked about, this idea of like the conflict begets conflict begets conflict. Like Achilles' return drags on, like his return to the battlefield drags on so long. When you finally get like what you've been asking for, and by you, I mean the audience who's listening to the Iliad, you're like, come on, Achilles, come on, Achilles. And then by the time the narrative gives you what you asked for, you're kind of also, I think, similar to, maybe some characters in the story as well. But you're kind of just like, ooh, maybe I didn't want that,
Mm-hmm.
Like, ooh.
Because it's brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it builds up so long and stuff that when you get what you asked for, it's not like, yes, he got him. It's like, ooh, okay, maybe I didn't want that.
Yeah, and I think we'll definitely have to talk about towards the end how our sympathies shift, and how our sympathies maybe are intended to shift between Achilles and Hector and all of this.
There's been a lot of Frankenstein discourse recently, so I've been thinking about the word monster and stuff, but like, sort of like, maybe at the end you realize, oh, was I rooting for the monster the whole time? Kind of.
Well, do you feel like you have been rooting for Achilles most of this time?
Well, there's no other way for the narrative to end, in a sense. There's no way to give the story an ending until Achilles does something, whether it is fight or not fight. So like I'm waiting like the whole time for him to just make a decision and do something.
Good point. Yeah, whether it's rooting for or not might be the wrong framework.
Yeah, okay, not rooting for, but
and expecting and anticipating.
Yeah. I've been at the whims of this character for the whole book.
That's a good point. Yeah, and I think that's actually kind of genius of Homer, that like just like he is trying to hold the rest of the Greeks hostage, essentially, by his sitting out, like, so too we are kind of held hostage, and we know that, like, we won't get any resolution until he does something or another.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, just do something.
Yeah. And now, right, like, for me, now that he is actually doing something, like, this book is the most we've had Achilles do since, like, book one, pretty much. I'm like, oh, like in book one, when you were doing stuff, I was like kind of on your side a little bit, but now I'm like, not. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not. Like, I don't think you're the hero that I should have, been sympathetic towards or anything. Like, I'm like, you got some stuff going on that, you're not handling properly.
Yeah. Like the narrative goes on long enough that you're like, oh, maybe you're not the hero.
Yeah.
Maybe no one is.
Yeah.
Maybe no one can be the hero in war.
Yeah.
Ooh, is that good?
Yeah. Let's end there. So we will have book 19 podcast next week. I have the audiobook of Samuel Butler's translation of book 19 ready if you want to listen ahead or if you're reading along on your own. We'll hope to join you back for that. We're getting towards the end. So we'll be done with the Iliad by shortly after the new year and then on to the Odyssey.
Yes. Which of course we're very excited about. And so I just wanted to plug that, like, if you're also excited for the Christopher Nolan Odyssey movie coming this summer, and you want to make sure that you've read the source material before you see the movie, like we're going to start reading it chapter by chapter, here on the podcast. And it's a great way to just jump in and, every week tick off another book and get closer and closer to the goal of having read the book by the time the movie comes out.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this with the Iliad and you're, dedicated enough to want to listen to the Iliad, even though there's not a famous movie being made about it, you're probably an OG fan. And so if you know other people who might be interested that might only join for the bandwagon of the Odyssey, let them know that it's coming soon. We're excited. We're not trying to skip over the end. The end of the Iliad is quite good.
Yeah,
but we also are very excited for the beginning of the Odyssey as well.
Yep.
Until then, happy reading.
Happy reading.